I'd like to make a small confession first. And that is that as a student of history, I really don't like researching the Second Temple period. For a very simple reason. There is a lack of primary sources. Medieval, modern Jewish history, there's more than you could, than you can use. But this particular period in history, we're very, very limited as far as primary sources. There's a lot of secondary stuff, and today, thank God, there's a lot of archaeology. But primary written sources, there's not a lot. As far as the Judaic side of things, we have the Gemara, the Mishnah, the Tosefta, the Midrashim, but a lot of those are even later. But as far as secular primary sources, we're really, really restricted. And that's why, because we have this lack of information, the picture is never really, whole or clear. Now, what I want to do today is I want to take those two elements, both the Gemara and Josephus, and how they look at the destruction. Now, just a few words, before we look at the actual texts themselves. For those of you not familiar, just a quick synopsis. Who is this man, Josephus Flavius? Who is he? Josephus is really the first Jewish historian. He is a very important person because, from a historical point of view, he's from the period. He's writing as it's happening. The other source I mentioned we're going to look at, the Gemara, of course, in Gittin, is written 400 years later. So being a primary source is kind of iffy. The other thing is the quantity of data. Josephus has this amazing, almost 80,000 lines worth of text for us to go to. It would be like today the equivalent of 12 medium-sized volumes of a historical, treatise. Now, Josephus wrote in Greek. It wasn't translated into English until 1737. Sir William Whiston translated. He was actually a Talmud of Isaac Newton. Now, when he translated it, first of all, the English he used is almost unusable today. But for the time, people looked at it almost as extra biblical. They kept a copy of the Bible on their shelves as well as Josephus because of all the New Testament stuff that he has in there. Now, Paul Mayer, which is the translation we're going to be using today, about 10 years ago did a new one in modern English, and it's really, really an interesting read. Now, Josephus is born in the year 37, and his father is Matityahu HaKohen. His mother was a woman from the house of the Hashmonaim, so he has the Yehus. He is an educated person, and in the year 64, he heads to Rome. He goes to Rome to advocate on behalf of a Jewish person who was convicted of a crime. He actually rubs elbows with all of the bigwigs in Rome, and he's very impressed with Rome. And when he comes back to Israel, the revolt is just about to break out. Because of his position in society, he is the commander of all of the rebel forces in the Galil. Remember, Israel at the time of the Romans, the Galil and Yehudah was separate. So he has a whole section of the country under his command. The battle doesn't go well, and he is held up in the city of Yotfata with his men for 47 days. They have this Masada-like pact, or they have a suicide pact. Rather than be caught alive, they all decide to kill each other. Josephus draws the lucky lot at the end, and him and the last guy standing do not kill each other. And he surrenders to the Romans. Now, there's a very strange story that he quotes, which we're not going to look at inside, but he actually goes and speaks to Vespasian, the Roman general, and tells him, "You are going to be Caesar." Very much like the Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai story, which we will look inside, but he puts it on himself, that story. And with this audience, he's granted, the emperor, not the emperor, the general then realizes what a great man he is, and he treats him nicely. Eventually, Josephus becomes an aide to Vespasian, and we'll see that role that he plays in the siege of Jerusalem. But after the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed, he is ferried off to Rome, where he becomes a servant of the house of Flavius, which is Vespasian's family, and eventually to his son Titus, or Titus. And that is where he writes his works. Now, the first two works that he writes, the first thing the Romans commission him to write, is, of course, the book of the Wars of the Jews, which is an account of the Roman battles with the Jews at that time. He also writes a book called Antiquities, or the Antiquities of the Jews, which is basically from Adam Harishon until his time, with a lot of interesting holes filled in that the Tanakh does not give us. And at the end of his life, he writes a book called Contra Apion, against Apion. Apion was one of the first Jewish verbal anti-Semites, and he argues with him in favor of Judaism. So he was a prolific writer. Eventually he's conferred Roman citizenship, and he ends up living in the mansion of Vespasian as his own house. So how do we treat this man? Is he a traitor? Was he a fallen commander? The rabbis were kind of split on the outcome of it. But now I want you to let's look at the sources right now. I want to first look at Josephus itself. And look on the first one with the illustration on it, page 341. One of the Jews taken prisoner in this engagement was crucified before the walls on Titus's orders, in the hope that the sight would lead to the rest to surrender in horror. After the retreat, John, the general of the Idumeans, while talking with a soldier in front of the ramparts, was shot in the breast by an arrow and killed on the spot. His death caused much grief for the Jews, for he was a man of gallantry and sound judgment. So what we have here is, Titus is, the first time we're kind of introduced to him here by the battle is he's trying to avoid bloodshed. He's this great man trying to avoid bloodshed. Turn the page over, please, where it says the Romans repulsed. On the fifth day, after capturing the first wall, Caesar, he's referring to Titus, although Titus is not yet Caesar, stormed the second, and since the Jews had fled from it, he and his men entered the new town district without widening the breach in the wall. And look at this very interesting sentence. Titus gave orders to kill no one or set fire to any of the houses. He promised to restore their property to the people, for his goal was to preserve the city and the temple. Sadiq. He sets him up as this wonderful man. The people indeed had long been ready for peace, but the rebels mistook the humanity of Titus for weakness and assumed that his overtures proved his inability to take the rest of the city. So we first have this account of Titus not wanting to lay a finger on Yerushalayim. Turn the page over, please, on 345. We continue. Titus, anxious to preserve the city from destruction, really, sent Josephus to negotiate with the Jews in their native tongue. Josephus therefore went around the wall, keeping out of range of projectiles and yet within earshot, and implored the people to spare themselves, their country, and their temple. Their forefathers, men far superior to them, had yielded because they knew God was on the Roman side. It was now hopeless to fight famine and the imminent conquest. Now, the little bracket said Josephus gives other historical examples about how the Jews gave in rather than fight and lived to see another day. During his address, many of the ramparts derided and cursed Josephus, while others threw missiles at him, and they did not yield to his tearful appeal. The people, however, decided to desert. They would swallow gold coins to elude the rebels, and after escaping to the Romans, they had the ample supplies after discharging their bowels. Titus released most of them, which further encouraged desertion. But the partisans of John and Simon, the Shimon bar Giora, kept a sharp lookout for such refugees and slaughtered any suspects. So again, we have a grandiose view of Titus, but a terrible view of the Jewish rebels. He groaned and, lifting up his hands, called God to witness that this was not his doing. Several things here. First of all, that a Roman battle-hardened general would lift his head and groan from dead bodies is kind of far-fetched. But further than that, that Titus lifted his head to God. He doesn't say gods here, he says to a God. His army, meanwhile, was in the highest spirits with plenty of food, and many of the Roman troops would approach the ramparts, displaying these quantities to accentuate the enemy's hunger. Titus, pitying the people and anxious to save the survivors, ordered new earthworks raised. Timber for them was scarce and had to be brought up from 10 miles away, since all the trees around the city had been cut down for the previous embankments. The new mounds were raised at 4 points opposite the Antonia, and were much larger than before. Antonia is the fortress the Romans had built on top of the Beit HaMikdash. The foundations are still there today. But we see that he's holding back. We get this feeling that Titus does not want to destroy the city at any cost. And he will, of course, build on that later. Turn to page 350. Now, we said before that the people were swallowing gold coins, and then, when they were searched as they left the city, the Jewish rebels could not take their money. They were ingesting it, and then later defecating and taking the money out. Well, Titus gets word of this. Some of the deserters jumped from the ramparts, while others started out carrying stones as if for a skirmish, and then fled to the Romans. When they arrived, swollen with hunger, many of them gulped down so much that they burst. But some learned that they had to eat moderately at first for stomachs unused to food. But even these were doomed, because one of the refugees in the Syrian ranks was found picking gold coins out of his excrement. After this, the Arab and Syrian rabble cut open the refugees and searched their intestines. And in one night, 2,000 were cruelly ripped open. On hearing of this outrage, Titus was on the point of putting his allies to death. He was so kanai for the Jewish people, but refrained because they were far outnumbered their victims. However, he threatened with death any daring to repeat the crime, and ordered his legionnaires to identify any such culprits in their ranks. Still, greed drove the barbarians rather than fear of punishment. So they now did their outrages in secret. They went forward to meet deserters and killed them where they could not be seen by the Romans. But few bowels contained any significant money. This disaster drove many of the deserters back. Okay, again, Titus, the wonderful person. Okay. Turn the page to 353, please. Now, this is very interesting because there is actually a Gemara with quite the opposite view of all of this. I'm sorry if it's a little bit tedious to go through it, but you'll see why I'm doing it once you get to the Gemara. Look at the bottom paragraph. It's a little bit cut off on your copies. The Antonia destroyed. In order to prepare an easy ascent for his whole army, Titus ordered the fortress Antonia torn down to its foundations. Learning that the daily sacrifice in the temple had stopped for lack of men or lambs, and that the people were therefore dejected, he's worried that the Jewish people in the city are dejected, Titus sent Josephus to tell John that he would allow him to come out of the temple and fight somewhere outside. I know you still want to fight the Romans, no problem. Let's do it elsewhere. Why? So they would no longer pollute the holy place. Titus was worried that the Beit HaMikdash would become tameh, would become defiled by the tumah of battle. And he's asking the Kohen, please come out. I know you have this urge to fight us, but do it elsewhere, not in your holy sanctuary. It's almost ridiculous. Turn to page 354. And here Josephus injects himself into the narrative. Titus, however, recalled the men from Gophna and ordered them to walk around the walls with Josephus to let the people see them. And great numbers fled to the Romans. People of Gophna were prisoners that had deserted to the Romans. Standing in front of the Roman line, the refugees implored the rebels with tears to surrender, or at least withdraw from the temple and save it from ruin, since the Romans would not set fire to the holy places unless compelled. Again, the Romans are this great people that don't want this city, this great temple, destroyed. Page 357 is the actual destruction itself. We're at that second paragraph. It just kind of blacked out in your copies there. Caesar, although angry at all who had mounted the portico without orders, was still touched with pity when he saw them. This is referring to the portico, the vaulted portico in the Azara that Herod had built. And urged his men to make every effort to rescue them, though nothing could be done. A few got back to the wall of the portico, which escaped the flames. He's looking to preserve Jewish life now. He's telling his soldiers to go, and I mean, it's almost silly. 359 in the bottom. The next morning, Titus gave orders that the fire should be extinguished and a road made to the gates to facilitate entry of the legions. He then called his generals together to debate the fate of the temple. Some wanted to destroy it at once, because it would always be a focus of the Jewish rebellion. Others advised that if the Jews would leave the temple, it should be spared. But if they used it as a fortress, it should be burned. But Titus declared that whatever happened, so magnificent a work as the temple ought to be spared, because it would always be an ornament to the empire. 3 of his principal generals agreed with him, and the council was dissolved. Go down on the same page. Titus then withdrew into the Antonia, intending the next day to attack with his entire force and overwhelm the temple. But on that day, the 10th of Los, the structure was doomed. The very day on which the former temple had been destroyed by the king of Babylon, when Titus withdrew, the rebels again charged the Romans, and conflict took place between the Jewish guards of the sanctuary and the Roman troops, who were trying to put out the flames of the inner court. The Romans were playing fireman here. The Jews were scattered and pursued up to the sanctuary. At this moment, the soldier, neither waiting for orders nor awed by so dreadful an act, grabbed a burning brand. Hoisted up by one of his comrades, he threw the brand through a small golden door on the north side, which gave access to chambers surrounding the sanctuary. As the flames caught, a fearful cry welled up from the Jews, who rushed to the rescue, caring nothing for their lives. Titus was resting in his tent when a messenger rushed in with the news. Jumping up as he was, he ran to the temple to stop the flames. You're laughing at it. Titus is running to put out the fire in the Beit HaMikdash. But there was such noise and confusion that the soldiers either could not or would not hear the commands of their general or obey the waving of his hand. Nothing could hinder the fury of the troops, as many were trampled by their own comrades at the entrances. Falling among the burning ruins, they shared the fate of their enemies. Turn the page, please. 361. The top of the page there. When Caesar could not restrain the fury of his soldiers, he and his generals entered the structure and viewed the holy place of the sanctuary and all the splendors it contained. So we do have an account of him going into Kodesh HaKodashim. Since the flames had not yet reached the interior, but were still feeding on the chambers surrounding the temple, Titus made one last effort to save it. Rushing out, he appealed to his troops to put out the flames, ordering one of his centurions to club anyone disobeying his orders. But respect for their general and fear of punishment were overwhelmed by their raging hatred of the Jews and hope of plunder. Seeing that all the surroundings were made of gold, they assumed that the interior contained immense treasure. And when Titus ran out to restrain the troops, one of those who had entered with him thrust a firebrand into the hinges of the gate, and the flame shot up in the interior. Caesar and his generals withdrew, and thus, against his wishes, the sanctuary was burned. So what do we have here? We have a view of actually Josephus' boss as being this wonderful guy who wanted nothing more in life than to save the Beit HaMikdash. Okay, selfish reasons for the glory of Rome, but still saving the Beit HaMikdash. Let's look at the Jewish sources and see how the Gemara treats Titus. Now, before we get to Titus, we're going to see the story of how Titus arrived in Yerushalayim. And we're going to get a very different story of someone else who calls Vespasian emperor before he actually is. And that's the famous story of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So look at page 2. It's 8 lines down. Okay. You see where it says Abba Sikra? The first word on the line is diktib. Okay. Abba Sikra, Resh Biryoneh de Yerushalayim. He was the head of the Biryonim. The Biryonim, we translate it in English as the Sikari or the Zealots, who the rabbis did not look upon favorably. They did not want conflict with Rome and saw the futility of rebellion. And who was this Abba Sikra? He was Bar Ahteh de Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He was the nephew of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Bar Ahteh, the son of his daughter, of his sister. Hava shalach le ta b'sin'a legabay. He said, come secretly to me, come see me secretly. Because his pals certainly did not want him conferring with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Ata, he came. Amar le, ad emat, abidtu hachi. How long will you guys persist in doing this? V'katlitu le le'alma b'chafna. You're going to destroy the world, destroy the Jewish people with famine. Amar le, ma ya'bid. What can I do, uncle? If I tell them anything, if I reason with them, they'll kill me. He says, tell me what, give me a solution. And he said, he says, help me get out of here. Maybe there'll be a little bit of salvation. I can save something. He said, make yourself ill. Let everybody come and visit you and ask how you are. He says, take something smelly, like a dead animal, put it near you in the bed, hide it so that people will think you've died. And people will think that it's your body decaying. He said, and let 2 people of your students take your body out, because they'll feel, whoever picks up that coffin will be able to figure out that you're not dead, because a live body actually is lighter than the dead weight you can feel when you're carrying a coffin. The live body, they can feel you shifting. So let your students only handle the coffin. So his 2 students did grab They were pallbearers. And when they got to the entrance to the city to take the body out, the Sikrikim, the Biryonim, wanted to stab the body to make sure the rabbi was dead. Amar lehu, and Rabbi Yoshua or Rabbi Eliezer said to them, Yomru Rabban Dakaru. They would tell you, look, they're stabbing their rabbi. Not nice. They wanted to just nudge him a little. Amar lehu Yomru Rabban Dahafu. They're going to say, look how they are pushing the corpse of their rabbi. It's not nice. Pathu le baba. They opened the door. Nafaq. And Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai was out. Ki mata lehatam. When he arrived there at Vespasian's camp, Amar, Shalma alach malka, Shalma alach malka. Peace be upon you, Caesar, king. You don't address a general as king. Now, he told him, Vespasian said, Amar le, Mehyabit terekatala, you're hayav mita 2 times now. Delav malka'ana. First of all, I'm not a king. V'kakarit li malka, and you've addressed me as such. V'tu imalka'ana ad ha'idana amayla atit lagabbay. Until now, why haven't you come to see me? So he answers him, Amar le, dekata amar lav malka'ana. He says that you said that I'm not a king. Ibra malka'at. It's going to become clear that you are Caesar. The ilav malka'at. لم امسرا يروشلايم بيدך تכתיב בלבנון באדיר ייפול ואין אדיר אלא מלך תכתיב והיה אדירו ממנו ואין לבנון אלא בית המקדש שנאמר הר אותו בזבח לבנון. So he proves to him, first of all, only a great man, someone who is a king, will destroy Yerushalayim. You're about to do that, that's you. So you have to be a king. וכאמרת אם מלכנה אמיילה כאתת לגבי העידנה בריוני De'id ban la shabkinan. He says, in answer to your second query, why haven't you come to see me until now? The Biryonim would not allow me. It was beyond my control. Amar le idlu habit shel debash. If you had a jug of honey, vidrakon karuk aleha, and you had a serpent wrapped around, drakon, a dragon, wrapped around this honey. Wouldn't you destroy the jug? Even though you might also kill the snake? Meaning, you should have taken down the walls and allowed us to come in and remove these biryonim. Ishtik. And he had no answer, the rabbi, for Vespasian. Kari ali Rabbi Yosef, v'itema Rabbi Akiba, meshib hachamim ahor v'da'atam. That sometimes God hides things from smart people, and at certain times they can't see a good answer. And what is the answer? He says, we were waiting for an opportune time until the Romans could have come in and destroyed this serpent, these biryonim. In any event, the story goes on, and we all know the end. He asks him, Ten li et yavne v'et hachamea. Give me the hachamim, give me the life of the line of Rabban Gamliel, and please send in a doctor for Rabbi Sadok, who's been fasting that Yerushalayim should not be destroyed for many, many years. But again, that story is attributed to Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai in the Gemara, not to Josephus. Now, on the same page, go 15 lines from the bottom. And now let's see the portrait that were painted of Titus. On the line that the first word is Maya. It's 15 lines from the bottom. I actually counted them. Hazal, Vespasian returns to Rome. Upon hearing of the death of Nero, he goes back. Shadre le Titus, and he sends his son Titus to finish the job on Yerushalayim. Ve'amar, Elohemu sur hasayubo. Where is their God? The rock they rely on, Ze Titus harasha. Shehiref v'gidef klape ma'ala. That Titus cursed God and acted in a horrible way, a haughty way, disgusting way toward God. Ma'asa, what did Titus do? What do we have so far? We have him running in, rushing into the flames and trying to put out the fires and commanding his soldiers not to kill Jews. What does the Gemara tell us about him? Ma'asa, tafas zona biyado. He took a prostitute. V'nichnas lebet kodshei kodashim. He went into the Kodesh HaKodashim. V'hisiya sefer Torah. The floor of the Beit HaMikdash is made of stone. So he laid out a scroll of the Torah on the floor. Ve'avar aleha avera. And he committed a sinful act with the prostitute in the Kodesh HaKodashim. V'natal saif. He took a sword. V'gideret haparochet. And he cut the parochet that separates the Kodesh from the Kodesh HaKodashim. V'na'asa nes v'haya dam mebasbes v'yoseh. And the parochet, blood began to spurt from the cut tapestry. V'kasabur haraget asmo. And Titus thought that he had killed, it says asmo, not himself, it means God. He had slain the Jewish God. Shneimar she'agu sorarecha bekereb mo'adecha semu ototem otot. Abba Hanan omer mi kamocha hasin ya mi kamocha hasin v'kasheh she'ata shomea niutzo v'gidufo shel oto rasha v'shotek. דבר בישמעאל תנא מי כמוך בעלים השם מי כמוך באילמים. These all are pesukim showing that God held back and didn't kill Titus on the spot. Ma'asa, so what did he do further? Natal et parochet, he took this bleeding tapestry, ve'asao kemin gargotane, ve'hebi kol kelim shebamikdash ve'ni'an ba'en. He took all the precious metals that he could, all the kelim of Beit HaMikdash, put them in this parochet, made a sack out of it. He brought them back to Rome to show off the spoils. שנאמר, ובכן ראיתי רשעים כבורים, ובאו מקום קדוש יהלכו וישתכחו בעיר אשר כן עשה. אל תקרא כבורים אלא כבוסים. אל תקרא וישתכחו אלא וישתבחו. וכדאמרי כבורים ממש, ואפילו מילי דמטרן עגליה להון. That even the things the Jews hid, he took. Basically speaking, they're all bringing Pesukim to show, to prove that this was foretold. Amad alav nahshol shebayam. There was a gale on the sea, a hurricane. The tob'o, and it was going to drown the boat. Amar kimdumei ani she'eloheim shel elu en givurato ela b'mayim. Ba'par'o teb'o b'mayim. Ba'sisera teb'o b'mayim. אף הוא עומד עליי לטובעני במים. אם גיבור הוא, יעלה לי יבשה ויעשה מלחמה. So, Titus challenges God yet again. And he says, it seems the God of the Jews is a water god. Par'o, his end was in the water. Sisera, remember it rained and the water came down. Nahal Kedumim, okay? Nahal Kishon. Let him come. If he's a real God, let him fight me on the land. יצאה בת קול ואמרה לו רשע בן רשע בן בנו של עשיו הרשע. Again, there's that putting of Esav, attaching Esav to Rome in the rabbinic literature. בריאה קלה יש לי בעולמי. I have a small creature. ויתוש שמה. It's a gnat. עמי קרא לבריאה קלה דמעלנה איתלה ומפקנה לטלה. That it has such a short life, this gnat, that it has the ability to ingest but not to excrete. It doesn't have, meaning it's such a small, insignificant, underdeveloped animal. He says, go ahead, big man, you get to the land and make war with this tiny gnat. A gnat entered his nostril and was picking at his brain for 7 years. One day he was going by the house of a blacksmith and he heard the smith, banging on an anvil. And when the gnat heard the banging on the anvil, ishtik, the gnat was silenced by the overpowering sound of the hammer. Amar, echa takanta. Wow, here's a solution. I'm cured. From then on, he had a smith hitting an anvil in front of him. If the smith that they brought that day was a non-Jew, they would give him a monetary reward. He says, it's enough for you to see your enemy being punished. That's enough reward for you. I'm not paying you money. 30 days this lasted, that the gnat was silenced by the banging of the anvil. Mikan ve'elach kevan de dash dash. Says after that it didn't matter anymore. The gnat became accustomed to the sound and began to pick at his brain again. Amar bi Pinhas ben Aruba ani haiti ben gedolei Romi ukeshemet pas'u et moho. They did a little autopsy when Titus died, and they opened up his head. They found a bird in there that weighed about an ounce. No, it was not a bird. It was like a gozal, like a chick. Ben shana mishkal shne litrin. It was about a pound, not an ounce. Amar Abaye naktinan piv shel nechoshet v'sipornav shel barzel. The mouth and the claws of this little gnat had turned into metals, and that was what clawing at the brains of Titus. Okay, so now, upon his death, ki avamit amar lehu likravile hahu gabra ulebadre likteme. He says, please burn me and spread my ashes asheb yameh on the 7 seas. So the Jewish God will not be able to find me and bring me to justice. So we have two very, very different views of Titus. Two very, very opposing views of who this man was. So now, as students of history, what do we do with this? First of all, as Yehudim, we have our Gemara. How do we treat the Gemara? How do we look at Josephus? These are all questions. Now, let's look at Josephus first. Josephus, for many, many years, actually, was not considered a very serious historian by many historians. That all changed, by the way, with, does anyone know with what? With Masada, that's correct. When they found Masada, they used his description of it, which he never saw, by the way, as a roadmap for what would be where. Yigal Yadin almost used his descriptions, and they were accurate, to like within a handbreadth of what was on top of Masada. So he was kind of resuscitated. But he's given to a lot of hyperbole. So many of his numbers don't make sense. Hundreds of thousands and millions. Those cities couldn't support those numbers of people. But those are the numbers he gives, and okay, it's really with one eye closed. Now he's also, don't forget, writing for Rome. His bosses are the house of Flavius. So he's writing, and he has to aggrandize the scale of the victory. And he has to make his bosses look good. But now on the positive side, Josephus is contemporary. He's watching it. The Gemara is 400 years later. Now, mind you, it's quoting Tanaim, but still, those Tanaim could have been within 200 years of the destruction, not eyewitnesses, as Josephus claims to have been. Now, in defense of both sources, both the Gemara and Josephus, when we read a history text today, it is quite different from the way people looked at writing history in ancient or even medieval times. There was no science of a historian, of someone coming to write down. It was far and few between. History was mostly written for a purpose. Now, of course, the Gemara, we know, was not about factual reporting. That's not what the purpose of Gemara is. It's morality, it's musar, it's halakha. Now, there's also a lot of moving parts here. any student of history, again, from the earliest ages when we're given social studies in school, what they used to call history, a child needs a narrative, and they give you a story. But you're given the story of the three little pigs, but you're giving it from the point of view of the pigs. He's the big bad wolf, not the hungry predator. So there's a lot of moving parts here. You have the point of view of the victim, and you have the point of view of the perpetrator. And there's also different ways to look at that as well. We have, in contemporary Holocaust literature, you have the point of view of the victim. You have books like Night by Elie Wiesel. But then you have a whole genre of books written about the perpetrators, about the Germans. And let me tell you, there's a lot more books written about the Germans than there are about the Jewish victims. We always seem to be fascinated with the perpetrator. Jack the Ripper is an exciting guy. The poor guy he killed on the way to the train one day is not very fascinating to us. Jack the Ripper is fascinating. The perpetrator is fascinating. So even when the victims are writing about the perpetrator, there is a lot of relish there. There is a lot of ill feeling. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of terrible stuff going on 400 years later. Remember, there was a second Jewish rebellion under Hadrian, the Bar Kokhba rebellion, that we're still feeling the galut from today. And the Jews living in what the Romans renamed Palestine at the time were not having a very good time of things at all. So when they are writing the history, they are not kind to the perpetrators. Whether or not Titus ran into the Hazal, which I doubt he did, which I very much doubt he did. So was he as vicious and as malicious as the Gemara makes him out to be, that he took a prostitute, put her on the floor, and had relations with her in Kodesh HaKodashim? Or was he as good as Josephus describes him? As the Gemara tells us, tiku. We're never really going to know. We're never going to have that actual, really accurate picture. But the truth is, that's with the study of all history. We never really have a clear picture. And as adults, we have to understand that the narrative really has, as we said, many moving parts to it. And in order to study it properly, you've got to have the whole picture. You must look at it holistically all the time. It's not only ever picking up one viewpoint. And thank God today there's so many new things coming out. Like I mentioned in the very beginning, with archaeology and with satellite imaging. And in Israel, it's like a daily thing. They have a situation room at Biblical Archaeology Review. Things just keep coming up, and it's such a beautiful thing that we could see that period come alive now, even though we don't have that many sources. And I urge you all to read up on it and keep abreast. It's so fascinating, the stuff that's coming out. And I want to just quantify something I said before. It's not that I don't like studying this period. It's that there's not a lot of stuff. But with all the stuff coming out, it makes it so much more exciting these days, to study the Churban and to see what went on. Many years ago, when I did this the first time, just want to relate a small personal story to you. I never got very emotional going to the Kotel. I want to tell you the first time I did. The first time I did, my friend Barnea Selavan, a lot of you know him, brought me on one of the early tunnel tours when it was still something not many people did. And he brought me to a spot that today they have behind plexiglass. And he said, put your hand on there. And I put my hand on this dark piece of wall, and my hand had cinder on it, ashes. And he said, you're touching the Churban right now. You're touching the ashes of the Churban. And I looked at this, and really, what is our connection? I once heard Rabbi Joey Dweck say, how can we mourn Tisha B'Av about an event that happened 2,000 years ago? And I did. At that moment, I touched the ash of Al Mikdash, and I got so emotional, I just cried on the spot. I got all choked up. And saying, here it is. This is the beginning of our galut. Here is the period that I live in today, the suffering of the Jewish people for the next 2,000 years Everything we went through, expulsions, inquisitions, pogroms, slaughter, annihilation, here it is. Here's the ash that began it all. And these texts contain those emotions. They're people witnessing it and trying to give it over. And we have to read these texts not as scientists or statisticians or as a historian would read a text. We have to read them as Jews and see where the emotion comes in. It's impossible to detach yourself from these texts in a way that is what makes us human about them. Yehi ratzon shenizkeh, not only to abel al Yerushalayim, but to merit seeing the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash. Amen.